So here we go again. Nama srashtang manumapi shachiputramatra surupam sri rupam tasyagrajamurupuring maturing goshtavatim radha kundam girivaram aho radhika madhavasham prapto yasya prasita kripaya sri gurum tang natosmi nindang tang pulakot karena vikasat nipa prasuna chaving Prodvi kritya bujadvayam hari hari tyuchairvadantang muhu nityantam drutamasru nirjara chayek sinchantam urvitalam gayantam nija parshadaih parivritam tam gora chandrang stumaha alibhik paripalitak prabalitak sanandamalokitah Pratyashang sumanah phalodaya vidho samodamamoditah vrindaranya bhuvi pramoda prakasha madhura sarvatishayi sriya radha madhavayoh pramodayatu mam Ulalasa kalpa drumaha Jaya Rupa Sanatana Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Raghunath Echai Gosaira Kori Charana Bandhan Jaha Hoite Vignanash Abhishta Puran Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So we continue on with Priti Sandarbha. We're in Anuched number 5, and as I was saying yesterday, there are every text, in order to understand a text, in order to master a text, one has to go through it 3 times. So 3 times means going through it with Shravanam, meaning to understand the meaning. So really what we're doing here, we're only at the state of Shravanam. We're trying to understand what is being said. And then there has to be reflection, Mananam, and then Nididhyasana. So when one has gone through that process 1 time, then has to go through that process again. Usually it's advisable to wait a little bit of a time between doing it. So this is a low-tech procedure here. I have to confess that I had a microphone here and I thought this microphone was working, but I've been looking at the sound and I realized that it's only the computer microphone that's actually functioning. And something's coming through, but but the sound is weak, and I'm not pleased with that at all. I'd like to have a better sound. So be it. Let's continue on here. Yesterday we had gotten to the point of saying that the jivas have agency through the grace or with the support of the Maya potency in the material world, and in order to get knowledge of the self or to get experience of the self, realization of the self, Swanubhava, Brahmanubhava, and Bhagavad Anubhava, there is an agency, the agency for those things, or the agency and so on, Bhoktritvadi, because agency means the ability to act and to have free will. In other words, to be an agent means to have free will. So one can choose what one does, and then bhoktritva, then one has to suffer the consequences of that action. So the meaning of kartritva and bhoktritva, the 2 of them together, indicates the existence of free will. So I mentioned this near the end of yesterday's reading, that I had entered into debates, because there are many texts which say that, for instance, that Brahmayan sarvabhutani yantra rudhani maya, that the jivas are riding on a machine of material energy, and they're actually completely governed by the 3 gunas in the material world, and so they have no separate free will or no separate agency. And so then the question, so then the suffering is all has no meaning. If we suffer or enjoy, it has no relationship to our own decisions and our own actions. And the Vedanta Sutra actually states that when the question of free will comes up in the Vedanta Sutra, it says that because there are instructions in the scriptures, there will be no meaning to the scriptures. There will be no meaning to the texts which advise us what to do. Why do we read the scriptures? Well, we have sambandha, abhidheya, and prayojan. The word abhidheya really means what is being communicated. Yeah. So sambandha tells you the situation that you're in, and a prayojan tells you what you're supposed to get out of it, so you can test the results. And so the sambandha gives you the reasoning behind the action that you have to take, and prayojan tells you the consequences that you can expect from taking the action that you're taking, so you can test the results. But the abhidheya, that gives you, that's the actual instruction. So the principal thing we talked about that. Yeah, we talked about abhidha vritti yesterday a little bit, about the direct meaning. So abhidheya, that which is to be communicated, that is which is to be understood as the direct meaning. That's the abhidheya. So the abhidheya, so all shastras have an abhidheya. They have what is it going to tell you to do? So if it didn't tell you what to do, there'd be no meaning to the shastras telling you what to do if you had no control over doing it or not doing it. So that's the basic argument that's given for free will in the Vedanta. Well, let's go on here, and we'll turn to the next thing. So in order now this is a difficult quotation. How does it relate to what we've just been talking about? So what we've been talking about is that the jiva's agency, and this verse comes up. I'll just read. I think I'll read the whole context here from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, because I'll tell you which part actually Jiva quotes, and then we'll see what is stated here in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, and also what Shankaracharya has to say about that, as being the principal commentator there. So yatra hi dvaitam iva bhavati tad itara itaram jigrati tad itara itaram pashyati tad itara itaram shrunoti tad itara itaram avivadati tad itara itaram manute tad itara itaram vijanati. So he says, where there is duality, right? Yatra hi dvaitam iva, where there seems to be duality, there itara itaram jigrati, there one entity smells another entity, right? An other and another. So there are two distinct things. There's the enjoyer or the experiencer, and there's the experienced. And then there's the nature of the experience itself. So itara, the experiencer, and itaram, the experienced, and jigrati, the experience itself. So at the end it says tad itara itaram vijanati, that one thing knows another. So now this is the part that, so after this, after having stated that in the Upanishad, it goes on to say, yatra va asya sarvam atmaiva bhut tat kena kam jigret tat kena kam apashyet tat kena kam srinuyat tat kena kam abhivadet tat kena kam manvita tat kena kam vijaniyat yenedam sarvam vijanati tam kena vijaniyat vigyataramare kena vijaniyat. So now so the question is that what we were discussing here was whether there are two kinds of statements in the Shruti about the about the supreme truth having parts or not having parts. So this is a statement where there is a statement of apparently a statement of not having parts. But in each case where there's a statement of not having parts, there's also the underlying message that there of parts existing. But this quite clearly says in the first part, where there is duality, there one thing experiences another. But where everything is the self, sarvam atma iva bhut, tat kena kam jigret. So the actual statement would be that who is smelling, or who would smell what and with what instrument. So by what would one smell what thing? And of course the kaha, who, is being understood there. And that comes out in the commentary. So yatra va asya sarvang atmai vabhut, where of an individual, of a person, for him the self has become all things, then who would see what and with what instrument? So in this particular case, where the self has become everything, there's no distinctions being made. So where is the distinction for this seems to be what we could say a direct statement of the first type, right? Where the mukhya vritti is telling us that there's only one Atma and there's nothing else. So let's read the Shankara commentary on that little portion. He says, yatra tu. So where Brahma vidyaya avidya nasham upagamita. So where the destruction of avidya or ignorance has been achieved through knowledge of Brahman, tatra atma vyatirekena anyasya abhava. So then in that particular case, other than the Atma, there is nothing else. So yatra vai, so the va here is a sandhya, for those who are following in the Sanskrit, it says yatra va asya. So if it was va, meaning or, then it would be yatra vasya. But the va is being sandhi, so the actual word there was vai. So yatra vai, so vai means certainty, so certainly where, you could put it that way, or definitely where. So where one, this person who is a Brahmavit, a knower of Brahman, then everything in terms of nama and rupa, etc., have been merged into the self and become the self alone. In other words, where the self has thus become everything, where all these things, the namas and rupas, have all become the self, then with what instrument would one smell what smellable object? Tatra kena karanena, by what instrument? Kam gratavyam, what object of the sense of smell? Who would smell? And so on it goes with all the other verbs that are in this paragraph. Tata pashyet avijaniyat, etc. So sarvatri, so now here's what he says. Sarvatra hi karaka sadhya kriya. So in order for let's just go down here a little bit to my translation. I'll read the Sanskrit and then I'll read the translation. So sarvatra hi karaka sadhya kriya. Ataha karaka bhave anupapattihi kriyayah. Kriya bhave cha phala bhavaha. Tasmad avidyayam eva satyam kriya karaka phala vyavaharah na brahmavidah. Atmatvat eva sarvasya. Natma vyatirekena karakam kriyaphalam vasti na cha anatma san sarvam atmaiva bhavati kasyachit tasmai avidyayaiva anatmatvam parikalpitam natu paramarthata Atma vyatirekena asti kanchit. So this is the Shankaracharya's view. So in all circumstances, a verb is dependent on its relations to nouns in the various grammatical cases, which are called karakas. There's a subject, an object, an instrument, and so on. So without substantives in the various case relations, it is meaningless. And without a verb, there are no results. An idea cannot be communicated. So therefore, the employment of verbs with a subject, object, and so on, as well as with its results, the results of the action, it is possible only in a state of ignorance, but not for one in knowledge of Brahman, since for him, everything is the self, the Atma. One cannot have case relations or actions leading to results. On the other hand, without a self, there is no meaning to the statement, for one for whom the self has become everything. Therefore, everything that is non-self has been conjured up by avidya. From the transcendental point of view, there is nothing but the self alone. So this is in order to show that the actions, the kartritva, so kartritva, kartri means karta. So karta is the nominative case, right? The doer of an action, the subject of an action. So the I do this. So I is the subject, it's the karta. And so when I say a sentence like I do this, then I am the karta, I am the agent of the action. So agency is present in this world, according to the way that Shankaracharya is stating it, that in the world, the material nature creates the identities and creates the names and forms, and so it becomes possible for there to be agency. It makes it possible for there to be movement and action in time, and so on. The nature of the material world, the world is called the jagat. It's constantly moving, right? And so moving means action. So action implies that there are agents and there are objects of action. The karma means the object of action or the result of action, right? When it talks about the result of an action, that's the consequences of an action. So the objects of action, instrument, the karana karaka, the karana is the instrument. So kena karanena tam pashyet, like that. So this is the statement there. But if you understand self, let's say, as God, right? So if we go back and see the things, the itarang pashyet, or itaram jigrati, itaram pashyati, and so on. That itaram. So if the itaram is jivaha and the itaram is bhagavantam or ishvaram, well, then you have the same thing going on by the agency, not of avidya, but the agency of avidya. So when the agency is of the internal potency, well, then the action is going to be okay. I'm going to scroll down here. So this is the idea of the agency of the material nature is providing the facility to engage in action by producing these names and forms, and the names and forms implies the doership and the objectification and so on of the different things. From the transcendental point of view, from the Brahman point of view, these things, these names and forms are false. They're illusions. But then again, if you look at it from the transcendental point of view, so we've gone from the Brahman vision to the Bhagavan vision, there again, the jiva is given kartritva. And he has an object, he can see Krishna, he can serve Krishna. So the desire of the devotee is, let me serve, let me become an agent of action, of service, by the grace of, or by the mercy of the internal potency, starting with the guru manjari, and starting with the Sakhis, starting with Radha, who is the who is the pleasure potency, the Hladani Shakti in its totality. So by the grace of the internal potency, one becomes an agent of action, and with the instruments that are provided by the internal potency, namely a spiritual body, and with the objects that are present in the spiritual world, one can see, and one can serve, and one can smell, and one can know, and one can engage. All the senses there are spiritualized in the relationship with the divine object. So now the second quotation here, and now this quotation is this is a quotation. So now that first statement, you had in its primary meaning was indicating non-difference and the non-existence of parts, right? And now here we have, so the second part, it was, again, and this Tat Swarupa Shakting Vinata Darshana Samartyam Dyotayati. So, Yam e Vaisha Vrinute Tena Labhya. So this is a very famous verse, and I'm sure that most of the people who are listening here will have heard it before, not just once, but many times. What is that verse? Nayam Atma Pravachanena Labhyo Namedhaya Na Bahuna Srutena Yame Vaisha Vrinute Tena Labhya Satasyaisha Atma Vivrinute Tanung Swam. That is a great verse, a fantastic verse from the Katha Upanishad. And this is often quoted, and this is obviously the purpose of the verse was to show that without the grace of the internal potency, nobody can know God, or nobody can know the self, and that is that no one can know the Atma. So this is a direct statement in which the distinction between the whole and the part is being clear. So Yame Vaisha Vrinute Tena Labhyas. He is to be attained only by the one whom he chooses. Indicates the incapability of a living being to see him without his internal potency. Nayam Atma Pravachanena Labhyo Na medhaya na bahuna srutena yam evaisha vrinute tena labhyas tasyaisha atma vivrinute tanum swam. So here is very clear, one of the most clear statements here, that the Atma and the Atma reveals itself. So it gives agency to the Atma to reveal itself and make it possible for the individual soul to be to experience the super soul, the Paramatma. See, the problem is that in the Upanishads you have the word Atma. The word Brahman appears much less than Atma. But once you've made the distinction between Atma and Brahman, well, then you have two different things. So that's the Upanishads and the Vedanta states that the Atma is Brahman, or that is the equation that's being made. Tat Tvam Asi. The Atma is Brahma. The self is the same. The internal microcosm is equal to the macrocosm. And this, of course, becomes another channel of speculation, let's say, or another channel of spiritual process that is followed through in yoga, where you have that the microcosm is a reflection of the macrocosm. But in a Vedantic, or in the Jnana Yoga process, there it's the question of the individual consciousness and the all-pervading supreme conscious. So tat tvam asi, you are that. You, the individual, pratyaksha chaitanya, are equal to the aparoksha chaitanya, which is Brahman. So that Brahman, Nayam Atma, so that you're talking about here, this Atma here, this question of Atma, that this Atma, well, in either case, so the equation of the individual Atma and the supreme Atma, that's something that is inevitable when we're looking at the Upanishads, because you're constantly getting both dimensions of meaning in every time the word Atma is being stated. So if you want to, perhaps you could say that the original point of departure is to know the self, because before the original, who am I? Ke ami, ke no amai jare tapatroy. That's the question that Sanatana Goswami poses to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He says that, who am I? So the beginning point, the starting point of inquiry is, who am I? And what is this world? That is the second point of inquiry. And that what is this world? In other words, who am I, the perceiver? And what is the world, the perceived? In other words, what lies outside of me? I seem to be perceiving a world here, but I do not properly understand what I am seeing. So I neither know what is outside of myself. And the great philosopher Descartes in the West, when he said that cogito ergo sum, the idea was that by cogito, I think, therefore I am. But I think that I perceive, and therefore I see something out there. So the capacity to perceive or to know the world, that is the evidence of my own existence. The question of whether I actually exist or not. But from that, the whole empirical adventure apparently is credited to that starting point, because in order to differentiate oneself from the phenomenal universe, and in order to know the phenomenal universe, one has to separate one's subjectivity from that universe, and one has to try to find ways of measuring and so on empirically in order to establish what the external world is in fact. So this is considered to be the starting point of the Enlightenment, and the starting point of Western empiricism. But here we are talking about something a little different. So the Nayam Atma, so this is the internal self, because the procedure of actually knowing who I am, when we say the idea of knowing who I am, this is to actually really know what I am. In the Western empiricism, of course, we treat the self like an empirical object that has to be examined, and of course this is not the way to that we can't really know the self through the empirical process. The psychology and so on will always fall short, because we cannot separate the self. As I am standing here, I can't study myself through objective senses, through the objective process. So therefore, it says here, Nayam Atma Pravachane. So this is why, prior to the Enlightenment, there were limits on scientific progress, because the knowledge of the self was considered to be more important. The knowledge of the self and the knowledge of God were considered to be more important than knowledge of the world. So now, of course, knowledge of the self, true knowledge of the self, is being used as in a psychological fashion. That in order to know myself, I have to examine, my antecedents, who I am historically, who I am. You examine yourself like you separate yourself from yourself, and you examine it. But what are you examining? You're actually examining the upadis. You're examining the material experiences. So something could be gained from that, there's no doubt about it. But here the point that Nayam Atma Pravachanena Labhyo Namedhaya Nabahuna Srutena. So not by intelligence, not by intellectual research, not by great amounts of study, and by studying objectively or studying subjectively, you're not really going to be able to understand what you really are. You can get some intimations, you can get some hints, but the actual knowledge of the self, that is something that comes, here what we're doing is, which I said, that we have Shravanam. First you hear from the authorities, you hear from the Shastra, and you hear from the Guru, and you hear from the sadhus in the Sampradaya. And by doing that, you make some progress in in understanding the concepts. But understanding the concept is quite different So even here, when in this verse, when he talks about na bahuna srutena, he's still talking about the shruta in terms of the scriptural knowledge, in terms of understanding from the guru. So even understanding or hearing and learning the shastra and so on, that this alone, or the application of intelligence, or through speech, one is not going to be able to really understand the self. That's a matter for aparokshanubhuti, of direct understanding, which comes, well, according to the Jnana path, it's going to start with Shruti, Shravanam, but then, of course, Mananam, and then Nididhyasanam. So the Nididhyasanam is the process whereby one actually assimilates the knowledge and comes to the knowledge of the self. So here, though, it says, Yam evaisha vrinute tena labhyas. So the self can only be attained by the one whom he chooses. So here the separation is being made between the Atma. The Atma chooses somebody. So who is this somebody that it's choosing? So that makes a distinction between Paramatma and the Jivatma. So, and then it says, Tasyaisha Atma Vivrinute Tanum Swam. So to that person, the Atma reveals its true form, its real form. So the self cannot be reached through debate, nor through intellect, nor through much study. He whom this self itself chooses may reach it. To him it reveals its own form. I would put, it is attainable to him whom this self itself chooses. The Jiva goes on from here. Ata eva swarupa shakti sambandhat mayantardhane teshang samsara nashaha. Ata eva swarupa shakti sambandhat. So from the relationship with the Swarup Shakti, mayantardhane, and from the disappearance of Maya, teshang jivanam, the jivas, samsara nasha, bondage in the material world, the samsara, comes to an end. So therefore, when the jiva's material existence comes to end, when Maya retracts as a result of the jiva's coming into contact with the internal potency, the Swarup Shakti. Now here we enter into a somewhat different topic, but it's obviously related. And now Jiva Goswami is going to say, well, look, we're talking about Ananda here. So far we've established that there are two kinds of statements, where there's two kinds of statements in which there is speech of there's being no part, or that the supreme truth has no parts. So what he's tried to establish here is that in actual fact, this idea of there being no parts, and that is there are two kinds of statements. One of them is being primary and one of them is being secondary. So, but there are primary statements also, like the one we just looked at, in which a division is made within the Atma. So you have Paramatma and Jivatma. And that the Jivatma, as in this statement, is dependent on the Paramatma for its knowledge, for its liberation, and for its bondage also. Because it's through the Maya Shakti that it becomes bound into the material world. So now the question is that can there be Ananda in Brahma realization? Now, you might say that's a silly question because obviously, well let's follow the thought as it's being presented here. But he says that Yeshang tu mate muktau anand anubhavo nasti teshang pumartata na sampadyate satopi vastunaha sfuranabhave nirarthakatvat. So those who propound that there is no experience of bliss in liberation cannot attain the goal of human life, because an object is worthless if it cannot be experienced, even if it should exist. So this goes back to the question of Ananda being reduced to existence. So it was said that ānanda matra twat. So it was stated that that Satchit Ananda, that's the nature of Brahman. But if Brahman has no parts, if Brahman has no visheshanam, if it's vishesha only, right? If it's the object in itself, if it's Brahman in itself, it's the supreme truth in itself, without it's the expression of its energies, then the Ananda that is there is reduced to existence. It's the Ananda of existence. It's not an Ananda in the true sense of an experiencer experiencing something else. Rasam hyevayam labdva anandi bhavati. So yeshang tumate muktao anandanubhavo nasti. So for some people, in the opinion, there is no ananda anubhav in mukti. Well, normally a person who is saying, wait a second, I'm doing all this yoga and I'm doing all this jnana practice in order to get ananda. But if there is no distinction between the experiencer and experience, well, what ananda can be, what is the nature of experience? So the important word here is anubhava, which anubhava means experience. So when one talks about aparokshanubhuti, well, even there the word anubhava and anubhuti are really synonymous. So it's even there it's kind of an oxymoron, because in that state there is no experiencer and there's no experience, so how can there be an experience? So the word aparoksha is meant to eliminate the problem of anubhuti. So it is an experience, but it's been experienced beyond the kinds of experience that one has in this material world. It's simply the experience of being. So the Ananda is the bliss of simply being without any sense of being a doer. There's no aham bhav. The aham there is aham brahmasmi. I am the one supreme entity, and there's no distinction between me and anything else whatsoever. So in that state, we may call it Ananda, but he says here that in Mukti there can be no experience of bliss because there's no experiencer. That's the point. So in that particular case, so Jiva draws the conclusion, if that's the case, then Teshang Pumarthata na Sampadyate. Well, we've established that the Pumartha or the Purushartha is the experience of bliss, right? Because that was the statement from the very beginning. We're looking for bliss and the elimination of suffering. Well, the elimination of suffering, by eliminating the experiencer and the experienced and the experience, well, then there's no more experience of suffering. So that part we'll accept. But if there's no direct experience of bliss, then there's no full manifestation of the Purushartha. So the Pumarthata na sampadyate. There's no attainment of the Pumartha. So, and the argument here again, he makes so his rationale. His rationale is that satopi vastunaha, so a thing that exists, even though it exists, satopi vastunaha, sfurana bhave, if it's not manifest somehow, that it has no meaning, nirarthakatvat. So the artha, purushartha is what we're looking for, and here it says it's nirarthaka, it has no meaning. An object is worthless, is Babaji's translation, because an object is worthless if it cannot be experienced, even if it should exist. So here we're saying that this has a relationship to the above Brihadaranyaka versa, the Anyakas, because if there is no experience or experienced, then even if Brahman is bliss, you say Anandaika rasa or Ananda matra, then there is no experience. So it was, say here, Pran Gopal Goswami, he says, it has been established earlier that all livings seek happiness or bliss. So he had that several times in the previous Anucheds. So that is the Purushartha. Now even if Brahman is Ananda in its essence, how can it be the Purushartha if one cannot experience it? A thing only has meaning if it is experienced. If it is not experienced, then its existence or non-existence are equal for all intents and purposes. So now if the Advaitavadi should object, and say, what is the need of experiencing Ananda just by being it, one can call that the purushartha. So moksha is a purushartha. So moksha, liberation. We're debating really the word moksha, right? But he says, so, but according to their concept, this state of liberation, this is the moksha. And so that's a purushartha. So it doesn't, what's the need of actually experiencing Ananda, just being Ananda? So now here's the famous, so Jiva Goswami answers that potential question by saying, Nacha sukhamaham syam iti kasyachid ichha, kintu sukhamaham anubhavami iti eva. Very nice. I think I'll take this sentence and put it in my manual for learning Sanskrit. Just look at this. Nacha sukam aham syam iti kasyachid ichha, kintu sukam aham anubhavami or anubhaveyam iti eva. Or anubhavani. Maybe that would be better. Anyway, it's a bit different because he's using syam here, which is a vidiling, and the second one, anubhavami, is just the present tense. So why he's made that distinction in the use of verbs is something for analysis. But I would say that here, he says, nobody, because in the translation we had, nobody desires, let me be happiness, but only may I experience happiness. Right? One wants to experience it. One wants to remain in one's own being, but to have within that being to experience something akin to happiness. So all the efforts that we make, the illusory efforts in the material world, are to engage the senses in the sense objects and thereby to experience happiness. And so that's also a false, because of the false sense of self, that cannot be realized. But in the but nobody says, "Let me be happiness," and that, of course, is the famous. I already previously was. I think maybe I even mentioned it in one of the earlier readings, that Ramakrishna Paramahansa is credited with this. Well, this here you see it's in Jiva Goswami. So Jiva Goswami comes before Ramakrishna Paramahansa, but everybody, at least in Bengal, knows Ramakrishna to have said, nobody wants to become sugar, one wants to taste sugar. Well, that's the point, right? That this goes back to the Brihadaranyaka statement that kam kena pashet, kam kena jigret. Who is going to smell what, and how is he going to smell it? How is he going to smell it? He doesn't have. There's no distinction between him and the object, and so therefore there's nothing to. He is the sugar, so how can he enjoy the sugar? Just like if in the whole question arises in this is interesting thought. That in the Rasa Shastra, for instance, there is a debate about who experiences rasa, right? And so the question is, well, the anukartri and is the person who is writing, is the person who is acting, all these other agents who are participating in the creation of rasa. And are they going to experience rasa? Well, an actor, for instance, does the actor experience rasa when he's acting? Well, he has to be conscious of his acting, and so he cannot be fully absorbed in the mood, or he'll, if he was, then he'll become overcome by by emotion and so on, and he won't be able to communicate the rasa. So the idea is if one becomes, in that particular case, then it would say that he is being the sugar, and he is not allowed, by the very fact of being the sugar, he is not allowed to actually experience the taste of sugar. So we go on here. So tatascha pravritya bhavat, so in the previous statement was nacha sukhamaham syam iti kasyachit icha, nobody desires let me be happiness. Kintu sukhamaham anubhavami iti eva, but only may I experience happiness. I think I changed I would like to see if there's a text where that's anubhaveyam, which would be the vidiling, or anubhavani, which would be the lot. I must experience happiness, which would be a different way of, would be a more consistent way of expressing it. Anyway, he goes on here. So, tatascha pravritya bhavat tadrisha purushartha sadhana preranapi shastre vyartha aiva syat. So here we get back to this idea of kartritva, right? So, because nobody acts in order to become sugar, but only in order to engage in sugar, to taste sugar. In other words, nobody wants to become Ananda, but one wants to taste Ananda. So therefore the scriptures give instructions, right? And so those scriptures are giving instructions, and he says here that the scriptures, any purushartha sadhana preranapi shastre vyartha eva syat. So it would mean that because nobody is engaging in a way that brings them, that is other than the seeking of happiness. Of course, the elimination of suffering is also there. But we're talking here not about the elimination of suffering, we're talking about the attainment of happiness, right? So nobody acts except to attain happiness. So therefore, any instruction in the scripture that inspires one, prerana, that prachodana is the word in Mimamsa, right? The dharma means to duty. So dharma is prachodana, the impulsion, the instruction to engage in particular actions, and that's found in the Shastra. But what is the purpose of that prerana? What is the purpose of that instruction in scripture? That impulsion or that inspiration to engage in action, here sadhana, purushartha sadhana, to practice something in order to engage. Sadhana means the means by which one gets something. So the means, the purushartha, the means by which one gets the purushartha of happiness, of ananda, that would be all meaningless. It would be purposeless. It would be futile. No one acts except to engage happiness. Therefore, any instruction in the scripture for a practice leading to such a goal, where there is no experience of happiness, would be futile. So the idea of mukti as being an experience of happiness, that is the that would be futile. So now he goes on. So tanmate, so in the philosophy, in their philosophy, kevalananda rupasya ajnana dukkha sambandha sambhavat tad nivritti rupascha purushartho na ghatate. Well, so the question was, there's two kinds, right? Ananda prapti and dukkha nivritti. So he's saying in kevalananda rupasya ajnana dukkha sambandha sambhavat tan nivritti rupascha purushartho na ghatate. So one whose nature is pure bliss cannot have a relationship with ignorance and misery. Therefore there's no possibility of having the goal of dispelling ignorance and misery without experiencing happiness. Follow? Because there is no connection of the Ananda Rupa, Brahma, having any connection with suffering. So this is a big point also. It's a question that arises often. Right? The question of, in particular, the fullest manifestation of Brahma is Bhagavan. So now, Bhagavan cannot be touched by suffering. This is something that Jiva Goswami has mentioned on several times, because this is the question of, and this was discussed especially in Bhakti Sandarbha. In Bhakti Sandarbha, the question was, how does one get into bhakti? Right? So, as we've been seeing here also, through the grace of the Swarup Shakti, one comes into contact with Krishna. But in Krishna, Krishna cannot be touched by suffering. So he cannot feel compassion for the suffering of the jivas per se, because the jiva is suffering, but Krishna has no knowledge of suffering. So for him to feel compassion, he has to have some experience or some knowledge of suffering. So this concept of God feeling suffering or suffering for the souls in the material world, this is something that is actually an impossibility. But it's possible for those souls who have some connection, who have had some connection to the material world, and their compassion arises because they see, they have some understanding of suffering due to their previous experience of it. But because there is no relationship of ignorance and misery in pure bliss, so this is agreed upon by the Advaitavadis also, that you have no connection to suffering in Brahman. Therefore, the jiva, unless he has an experience of that bliss, he cannot become free from ignorance and misery. So that purushartha, the second part aspect of the purushartha, meaning dukkha nivriti, that doesn't arise. So I think that we'll have to. Well, let's see. So Sri Goswami, Jiva Goswami's intention in saying all this is to show that the Advaitavada concept of the jiva is not conducive for the ultimate goal in the form of Ananda. If there is no agency and enjoyership or cognition in the state of mukti, then what is the inspiration to acquire it? The only inspiration is that there is no misery, but there is also no happiness and no hope for it. Although Ananda exists, in the Advaitic type of mukti, one cannot experience it. Therefore, it has no value. It is as good as not having it. There is no difference between a pauper who does not have any money and a miserly person who would not spend his money on anything. In fact, it is even worse if the miser does not even know that he has money. To attain mukti without agency and no ability and cognition is exactly like that. So I'm having a problem with this word that Babaji is using here, no ability. So let's see, we have just a little bit left here. Let's see if we can fit it in. We're going to go over time here, but I'd rather finish this section. So, so vigitam tu idrisha purushartatvam prachina barhisham prati Sri Narada vakye. So such a goal has been vigitam, or has been denigrated or despised here, in the words of Narada spoken to King Prachina Barhi. This is at the beginning of the 25th chapter of the 4th canto. So there he says, dukkahanihi sukhavaptihi shreyas tan neha cheshyate. So such a goal has been despised in the words of Narada spoken to King Prachina Barhi, that welfare, which is the word shreya, is being used, but we're taking shreya here to be the same as purushartha, shreya, preya. It lies in the cessation of sorrow and the attainment of happiness, dukkahani sukhavaptihi. But you cannot expect this from works. Nacheha cheshyate. So only the second line was quoted from this verse because he wants to emphasize again the basic principle, which he's stating here, which is the purushartha. So he's saying here that from works it can't be attained. But, I'm not fully happy here with my understanding. So Shreyas Tvam Katamadarajan Karmanatmana Ihase Dukkha Hani Sukhavapti Shreyas Tandaneha Cheshate. Well, the Dukkha Hani and Sukhavapti, we've seen that. That's our Purushartha, right? So welfare lies in the cessation of sorrow and the attainment of happiness, and such welfare cannot be expected from karma, done with a material motive. Well, here's the BBT translation is, my dear king, what do you desire to achieve by performing these fruitive activities? The chief aim of life is to get rid of all miseries and enjoy happiness, but these two things cannot be realized by fruitive activity. And Gita Press, what good, O king, do you seek for yourself through rituals? True welfare lies in the cessation of sorrow and the attainment of happiness, and such welfare is not expected from them. So, well, the point that I'm having a problem with here is that this idea of, I think that, well, because he's talking about karma here, so one would say, well, this is the jnana path, and well, anyway, let's go on. So he says, Tasmad asti evanubhava. So from that quote, he's drawing the conclusion that in the state of liberation, there must be experience of bliss. And one more statement, yes, which we've seen many times now. Tatacha srutihi rasam ayam labdva anandi bhavati iti atma ratihi atma kriraha iti adischa. So therefore it is certainly an experience of, there's certainly experience of bliss in liberation, and there are also shrutis to this effect. After attaining him, one becomes blissful. Rasangyevayam labdhvanandi bhavati. And atma ratihi atma kriraha, this is in Chandogya Upanishad, he loves the self, he plays with the self. The use of the word self, atma, in both these quotes are an indication of nirangshatvam, because no distinction is being made explicitly of atma and paramatma, but at the same time a distinction is being made. So you have on the same time, you have the apparently the lack of a distinction being made, but at the same time a distinction is being made. So I believe this is the concluding portion. Yes, that's the little bit of commentary at the end here. So moreover, in the opinion of the Advaitavadins, Brahman is of the nature of Ananda. The Jeev does not have a separate existence. It is the same as Brahman. Suffering and misery cannot contact Brahman, whose very nature is Ananda and Jnana. Therefore, there should be no need to make an effort to remove the Jiva's misery and ignorance. So this is another point that wasn't being made, that I didn't make at least, but or that was not directly being made. So if you had, if the Jiva and Brahman are one thing, then the Jiva should need to make no effort to remove ignorance or to attain the supreme truth, to attain Ananda, because those things would already be existing in himself. So, of course, there are people who advise us like that, say you should think like that, you should think of yourself as being Anandamaya, and that you are not touched by any misery, but this is a kind of an artificial state, and that means removing oneself from all sense objects. In fact, the yoga system, the kaivalya of the yoga system, is exactly that. In the yoga system even, it says that one has to surmount Ananda. There's a stage of samadhi in which one experiences Ananda. But in Kaivalya, one has to go beyond Ananda, and that one does not, there's no question of either dukkha nivritti or Ananda anubhav in Kaivalya. You can look it up. So so there would be no necessary to make an effort. So the scriptures are telling us to make an effort to attain liberation. But why would that effort be necessary if that was the actual state of the self? So Narada tells King Prachina Barhi that attaining happiness and removing misery is the purushartha. But in Advaitavada, such a purushartha is not possible. The Shruti clearly says that only by attaining rasa or ananda can one be happy. So such a purushartha is not applicable in Advaitavada philosophy. According to them, there is nothing to achieve. One is that, tat tvam asi, you are that. So therefore, that was the say when we read back in the Panchadashi, And it said, Tat tvam asi tasmat tad anubhuyatam. So there gives a vidiling. So vidiling means an instruction. So the Shastra, the prachodana of Shastra, the abhideya, is manifested in instructions that are expressed as vidhis. Smartavyak satatang Vishnu vismartavyo najatutit sarva vidhi nishedhak syuhu etayor eva kinkaraha. So vidhis and nishedhas, that's the nature of to do something and not to do something. Instructions of that nature. So anubhuyatam, even there he was saying, tat tvam asi, tvam tad anubhuyatam. So you must try to recognize that you are that. But in fact, if you are that, then there's nothing to do. You just are that. So the idea that one must do something, but not to do something within the functionality of the material nature, the Bahiranga Shakti, but to take the anugraha, the grace of the internal potency, and then one can experience the Ananda of Brahman, which is the same thing as Bhagavat Anubhava, experiencing Krishna, experiencing Bhagavan in Seva. Right, so that's the end of this reading, and tomorrow we'll continue on, and I think that was established a little bit better than yesterday, and I wanted to do both these sections together, but it was too much, and so they've been separated, but I think that's okay. We'll call 5.2 B, and or call it Ananda is not possible when there is in Brahman realization. So, Sarve bhavantu sukinaha. So let everyone be happy. There we go. Sarve bhavantu sakinaha, sarve santu niramaya. May everyone be free of misery. Sarve bhavantu sukinaha, sarve santu niramaya, sarve bhadrani pashyantu. So may you all see joyful things wherever you go. Ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet, and may you not experience suffering anywhere. There you go. There's that verse is perfect for our topic. And Purnam Vadaha Purnam Idam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnam Evavashishyate. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. Jai Jai Sri Radhe, Jai Jai Sri Radhe, Jai Jai Sri Radhe Shyam, Jai Jai Sri Radhe.